Welcome back to another hour of Scotch Hour. I'm Noah.
And I'm Jesse.
All right, this is episode 158 of year 4.
That's
I guess
right.
what, episode 2 really?
Episode 2, year 4.
All right, well, this evening we got Dalwhinnie 15 year, followed by our shout-outs and get-it-togethers, restaurant review being the Great Divide Brewery and Roadhouse, and then we'll jump into our Smarter Challenge of picking a war, giving a brief synopsis, and what did we learn from this war?
If anything.
If anything, yes. All right. Before we get started with the Scotch, real quickly, thank you to all the viewers on YouTube and Rumble. We greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you to all the listeners on the many different platforms that you can listen to us. We greatly appreciate all of you as well. And thank you to all the comments that we received recently, as well as the couple new subscribers. So we thank you for all that support. And if you do like our content and this is your first time listening to us, or if you've come back and visited us again, please like, share, and subscribe and leave some comments down below. We greatly appreciate that. And let's get ready to rumble.
That's right. And with those comments, please do understand that we are trying to streamline your viewing experience so that we can make this more enjoyable for you, the viewer. From some of the feedback we've gotten, we greatly appreciate that. Please keep giving it. We will keep using it.
Scotch Review.
This week's Scotch, the Dalwhinnie Highland Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. And man, this is going to be a treat. I think it's going to be interesting. This Scotch is from the highest distillery in Scotland, set in the windswept Grecco Mountains with their unlimited supply of fresh spring water. Comes this delightfully gentle, delicately smoky malt. The Gaelic word from which the name Gaelic. That's what it says. The Gaelic word from which the name Dalwhinnie comes is Dale Contenane. That's not at all close to what it probably is. But we do have Dale Coinerum, which translates as meeting place. The highest distillery in Scotland was founded on those bleak, windswept Central Highland pastures in 1898. The classic Highland malt Dalwhinnie ages slowly to develop a remarkable character. 15 years of gentle aging make it a smooth and subtle malt without a trace of harshness. That's going to be interesting. Heartwarming, yet also mellow and honeyed. Its combination of delicacy and depth sets it apart. Where it matters, Dalwhinnie retains the old ways, increasingly rare wooden worn tubs, a landmark outside the distillery as distinctive as its pagoda roofs, help this remain a spirit of real character. Hidden depths are also apparent. Smooth tasting Dalwhinnie yields flavors of creamy vanilla and a heather honey sweetness, finishing in a smoky Highland glow of surprising intensity. Dalwhinnie is the remote Highland destination on a journey around Scotland's 6 malt whiskey making regions. The other classic malts that they are part of this group: the Glenkinchie, Greganmore, Talisker, Oban, and Lagavulin. And it's interesting here, they list the Glenkinchie as a lowland single malt Scotch, Greganmore as Speyside, Talisker from the Isle of Skye, of course. They've got Oban listed as a West Highland, and Lagavulin listed as an Isla. This is a Diageo single malt Scotch, and the only other Dalwhinnie we've tried thus far on our show was during our great adventure through the Game of Thrones Diageo expressions, where Dalwhinnie was not the winner, but did give us some fun for a few evenings.
Dalwhinnie, I didn't really see that they had a website strictly for their own. They're on the malts.com website, but it did have some tour information on there. Really, they have basically two different types of master class tastings and then two different types of tours. So the first one's called the Classic Tasting Master Class. It's 15 Great British Pounds. Here, what they do is they have you'll have like a guided talk through of the history and the making of Dalwhinnie, and you'll get 3 drams paired with chocolates. Then there's the cask draw and premium tasting. This basically same. You get the master class where you get a tour or a guided talk through, I should say, not tour, but a guided talk through. And here you'll get 6 drams paired with chocolates, and that's 45 Great British Pounds. And when it comes to tours, it's pretty much reflective of that as well, because there's the classic tour where you get a guided tour of the distillery. Then you get the master class, and you get your 3 drams with chocolate. That is 19 Great British Pounds. And then you have the exclusive Expressions tour. And here you get the tour of the distillery, but then you get the masterclass with the 6 drams and your chocolate pairings. And that goes for 65 Great British Pounds.
All right, so as we dig into this fine single malt Scotch, again, remember it is a 15-year distillery established in 1898. And the first thing I will say is it's got some pretty good detail, but this box is flimsy. It is not impressive from that standpoint at all. I do love the detail they've got on the inside of the top, the gold, the colors, but man, it feels paper thin. The bottle itself, all right, let's see about this. I actually kind of like the bottle. It's got a good looking foil stamped with the Dalwhinnie. It looks like the Dalwhinnie crest upon the top. Some great colors, and man, I hope these colors are indicative of just how sweet this honeysuckle honey flavoring is supposed to be. As I start to peel off the foil, I do appreciate that the foil is a nice thick foil, well perforated, doesn't just tear apart, isn't some flimsy plastic / paper. Good, that is terrible. And upon moving the foil, unfortunately, it does have a plastic top. Now, as far as the plastic top itself, it's interesting because they've gone the extra inch to make it look like metal, but it is not. That is a tight seal. All right, it is also pressed cork. Now, this is not one of the higher price scotches on the market, that's for sure. But as a 15-year, I would anticipate for a distillery that claims to take such pride in their slow aging process and many things, they might put a little more detail in some of those pieces. I do like the shape of the bottle. And I do love this color. All right, it is time for the tasting
and our warp speed. Cheers.
Cheers.
The Dalwhinnie 15-year. I thought I was pretty impressed with that. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, when we tried the Dalwhinnie from the Game of Thrones series, it was impressive. I believe that was the House of Stark version.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Winter's Frost.
Yeah, that's House of Stark. So because winter is coming. But in any case, I remember liking that one a lot. I think it went pretty far in our little contest that we had with it. But I was very impressed with this. I thought this was really good. As far as the presentation goes, the box itself, I mean, I like the color. It's not like overly busy. I know they have like stuff on every side of the box, and I'm okay with that because it doesn't seem like like I said, it's not busy. It doesn't like really bother the eyes or anything like that. I think it's well done. Although the box itself, as you mentioned earlier, is a little bit flimsy, and I'm not sure I really like that. The bottle design itself, I think I could be mistaken, but it looks like they're trying to make it look like a vat. And I guess if you like that, then it's great. But I'm not a huge fan of that design, at least not in this particular case. And it has a plastic top and pressed cork. So here, not very impressed with the bottle itself. The one thing I will say that's great about this bottle is that it does seem like a pretty hefty glass, which that I do like. So because of that, I still gave it a 4 out of 5. The color here, I thought it was a really nice amber gold, which I really enjoy. I really like the colors. Like it's a nice, beautiful color, what you expect from or at least what I would expect from a good Scotch, and I really enjoyed it. So I give that a 5 out of 5, which usually most time I give color 5 out of 5 unless there's something really, really wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, now on to like what really matters. The bouquet or the nose. Here, for me, the initial whiff of the Scotch it reminds me of floral. It's very floral, and it's like apple blossoms, if you will, and almost like. And here's the thing to me too. I know it's not exactly right, but it reminds me of like when cherry blossoms bloom. Like when you go to like DC or when I lived in Salt Lake, there's like a lot of cherry blossom trees, and so that's what that fragrance reminded me of, is those cherry blossoms. But I know it's more of like an apple blossom as opposed to a cherry blossom. But nonetheless, that's what it reminded me of. And I think it's great. I love the floral scent there. But it also has hints of toffee, honey is also very prevalent in the nose there. But then and then it has like minor hints of like apple and smoke as well. And did I say pear? I think I might have left out pear. It does have pear in there as well. I gave this a 27 out of 30. I really did like the nose. The palate. Here I gave it hints of walnut, honey, and cereal with a touch of crisp apple. Is what I got on my palate there, which kind of then goes into like a cinnamon spice during the transition from the back part of my palate going into the finish. And to me, the cinnamon spice there wasn't overly spicy, so it kind of, and with that crisp apple, it kind of made a nice transition right there, going from almost like an apple cinnamon going into my finish, which was a malty honey almond flavor that lasted and lingered and really made me crave to have another sip after that flavor dissipated, which I really enjoyed. So the palate, I gave it a 27 out of 30, and the finish, I think there could have been a little bit more to the finish, and I gave that, so therefore I gave that a 26 out of 30, grand total of 89 points. Would I take it to Black Tie Affair? I would not. Would I take it to a game night? Yes, I definitely would take it to a game night. Do I think it belongs somewhere on the shelf? Actually, I do. I think it does belong on the shelf, and I would recommend for people to give it a try.
I think your assessment is very, very spot on. Great job with that. For me, the presentation also a 4. Finicky about the little stuff that may not matter to some people. and I'll go right down to like the shoebox. If I'm buying a damn pair of Gucci shoes, I want a nice shoebox. Like if I'm dropping $750 on my flip flops like I do, then I want a nice box. Even if most people just throw that away, you can do what you want, recycle it, do what you want. I want the nice damn box, and I also want the fabric bags to store them in after I clean them, after I wear them. All right, so presentation only a 4. I didn't mind the bottle. I did not care for the topper or the pressed cork. Color, I love this color. This, I don't know that you can find a greater gold color than in this bottle, in this light. That is dynamite. I think it's fantastic. And it makes me think of Robert Frost's poem, Nature's First Green is Gold. Well, you know, the actual title of that poem is Nothing Gold Can Stay. But with that, it does make me think of nature's green. First green is gold. The nose. It is a little florally, and it's clean and crisp and fruity and fresh. The pear, the orange, followed by toffee and oak, and the tiniest little bit of smoke. A great nose on here. I enjoyed it a little bit more than you did. I gave it a 28. On the palate. It's a hard toss-up for me, whether the nose or the palate's the win. But this palate is dynamite. It is clean again, but it's also rich with fruit. It's rich and fruity, almost like that flavor you are finished with when you have a bite of fruit salad. There is a little bit of sponge cake, the cinnamon and nutmeg pop. And once you get past those front flavors, that's when it transitions for me into a malty flavor, a malty feel with walnuts, vanilla, smoke, and oak. And I love it. I also gave the palate a 28. The finish was the one area, and I think it's because the nose and the palate were so dynamite to me. The finish was the one area that I think could have been a little more impactful on my score. There is that same spice with cinnamon and nutmeg. There's a little bit of fruit in there. The nice thing is the finish is balanced. I don't always want that because I don't think it stays very long. I immediately want another drink. So good to Dalwhinnie. If all they wanted to do was drive sales, that would be their win. But that finish is long with the walnuts, and it's malty. Yeah, it's almost, you mentioned almond. It could be also a little bit of almond, but it's definitely got some walnut in there for me. My grand total, 91.
I guess I was a little bit more harsh on it to you.
Man, the nose and the palate were a huge surprise to me.
Yeah, on the finish to me, I haven't had this cereal in a really, really long time, like since I was a kid. But it kind of reminds me of honeycomb cereal.
Okay, so it's funny that you say that because when I took my first couple sips, on the front, I tasted Fruity Pebbles, but on the back, I had the honeycomb. Yes, yeah, I agree. You nailed it.
Okay, on to our...
Sorry, I forgot to finish. Black tie, not quite sexy. I don't think I'm taking this to a black tie. I would take this to a game night in a heartbeat because I want to talk about it. There's always those fun facts like the highest distillery in the Highlands and all that business, which the Highlands aren't really even the highest point, which is great. But it does have a place on the shelf, and I agree with you. Yes, it does have a place on the shelf. It is pretty dynamic. And it makes me want to try other Dalwhinnies, but they are less in variety, at least in our locations.
It's time for our shout-outs.
I'm going to throw this out here as my shout out because this scotch did make me think of it, and it's wonderful when any author, director, artist of any sort really does something that really sticks with you. And for me, my shout out goes to Robert Frost and his short poem, Nothing Gold Can Stay. And it's referenced in a lot of movies and more often misquoted as nature's green is gold. But Robert Frost poem, Nothing Gold Can Stay. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. I think it's a great poem about really understanding that it doesn't matter if something was gold forever, its value does diminish just as a nature of time. And it's interesting. Shout out.
I'm giving you a shout out for hooking me up with Shopkick.
All right.
For those of you who don't know what Shopkick is, it's an app. You go and you scan. They give you points for walking into the stores and scanning products. And when you gather so many points, they give you a gift card to like certain places. And so Jesse hooked me up. I got my first $5 gift card if I want to utilize it. So thank you very much. Shout out goes to you.
My pleasure. Now, the whole real purpose for this is because Noah and I realized we wanted to increase our step count. So it gives us an excuse to go walking. All right. My get it together. I don't know who's to blame for this debacle, but how is it Biden managed to pay off so many student loans for so many different people, but then he lets the whole FAFSA system totally fail? So they went to go redesign it so that the free application process for financial aid for students would be better. And instead what happened was it got delayed, and that delay was first a month and then 2 months and then 3 months. And now there are a plethora of colleges who have students who don't have the acknowledgement that they're going to get this financial aid, and they're withdrawing. They're like, hey, I can't afford your school. I'm so sorry, I'm not going. And FAFSA, it doesn't have an answer. Like, oh, we're working on it. Wait a minute, why are we busy paying as a government all these loans for people who already got their education? But if you're trying to really impact the future potential positively, this is what he should be going after. Like 3 months is ridiculous. Can you imagine? Like, schools kick kids out for that. Like, you literally don't get to keep going to school. Your room and board cut off. You're done, son. I just literally can't believe that this has happened.
I can.
Yeah, I know you can, because...
Well, they're giving illegal aliens $2,500 stipends every month or something like that. But yet they can't figure this out.
Well,
yeah.
I'm glad my tax dollars aren't going to my kids. Wait. No, I'm not glad my tax dollars aren't going to my kids. Redonkulous. Restaurant Review. This week's restaurant, the Great Divide Brewery and Roadhouse. We went to the Lone Tree location, which is just west of I-25. I guess I should say it's just southwest of I-25 on Lincoln. Man, I honestly was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was going to be a thing. We got a little flyer in the mail, and one of the things we do believe in is supporting our local communities. And so we took the flyer, we saved a few bones, so to speak, and went and had a breakfast. For myself, we drove up. The exterior environment seemed like if they were truly slammed and busy, They might have had a parking situation. However, we did not experience that. We got right in, right out. I do question, in a positive sense, if this might be part of, and I think you used this phrase, the Charles Schwab campus. Because if that's the case, brilliant. Because the exterior was really nice. I ended up giving the exterior environment a 9. Granted, I need to go back during the night to really give it a fair judgment. But the interior atmosphere was dynamite to me. I gave it a 10. I thought it was welcoming. I thought it was comfortable. My seat wasn't some hard seat where they're just trying to turn a table. I loved the music that was quietly playing at the time we were there. The bar setup, the table setup, they had an exterior seating. It was beautiful. It was brilliant in the sense of it could potentially give everyone something they would want. Of course, seating would always be first come, first serve. But yes, that interior atmosphere at 10. Service, we were greeted right away, sat down right away. Our server was a little quirky. I'm giving him a 9 nonetheless. I thought he was great. I don't know that I loved his recommendation for the fried pickles because they were good, not great. And good in a sense that they were still really damn good. But he was Johnny on the spot. Water, beers, everything else. Service was a 9. Food. Okay, this is where it gets busy. I had the hangover helper. Now, these are buttermilk biscuits with, it says scrambled eggs, but you can find out, you just ask. Eggs of choice, I got eggs over easy, applewood bacon on the side, sliced jalapenos, caramelized onions, chorizo gravy that was fabulous, and some cheddar cheese. Man, my food, that dish was a 9. That dish itself was a 9, only because the biscuits weren't fresh. And I understand that, and they weren't bad. They just weren't fresh biscuits. And then I had the fried pickles and a Titan IPA. The Titan IPA also from an IPA standpoint was it's an 8. The fried pickles also an 8, rounding the 3 together. The food for me got an 8. Value-wise, well, we did have a coupon, so that always helps. But food prices I thought were very reasonable. If all I was doing was drinking beers, I think that tab would have gotten very expensive very quickly. I don't know what the value would be there then, but from a food standpoint, the value was an 8. Overall, man, 44 divided by 5, you got an 8.8. That was fantastic. Would I meet a friend there? 100%. Like, I would love to take a bike ride or meet a friend taking a bike ride there, or walk there if I was closer. Would I take a date there? Absolutely. Is it a destination? This is the tricky part. Only been there once. I can't say yes, it is not a destination yet, but I could see it being a destination in the future.
Outside, I really thought the outside was done well because it does look like it's part of the Charles Schwab campus, and it's like in the bottom corner of one of the buildings there. So because of that, it's the exterior area is, I think, well maintained. You're not seeing like a bunch of like potholes or anything like that. But likewise, nighttime would be checking out at nighttime, seeing what the lighting situation is like. That would make a difference. But overall, I gave it an 8. Inside, like you, I really enjoyed the inside. I thought it looked really nice. It looked very modern, inviting, and I'm going to use one of your words. Sexy.
I knew it, because that was what I was going to say.
But yeah, you know, it had that panache to it, that shiny, modern look that, like, that you would expect from a higher end place. And when I'm saying higher end, I'm not saying like fine dining. I'm saying like higher end of like the middle tier sit down restaurants where you're getting closer to exiting out of it. So I gave the inside a 9 out of 10. I didn't quite give it a 10 out of 10 because I always think there's room for improvement. Dude,
nowadays I think sexy's getting 10s out of 10s for me.
Food. The food, I got the breakfast burrito, which was smothered in green chili and cheese, and it had scrambled eggs, potato, I think chorizo, was in there. I'm not sure what else was in there. I didn't really pay too much attention about what all the interior was, but I went with the breakfast burrito. I loved it. It had great flavor. It was filling enough, and I gave it a 9. I thought it tasted great, wonderful. The wait staff, you're right. He was a little bit quirky, but here's the thing: he was super nice because I didn't know what I wanted to drink right away, so he periodically checked in and asked me. He wasn't overbearing, like how some waiters are like, if you don't tell them what you want to drink, they sit there and they badger you, kind of like they keep showing up right away. But I think his timing was perfect, and so I gave him a 9 out of 10 as well. The value, looking at the food value, I thought the food value seemed very appropriate for its designation, I guess, is like it being that middle tier, upper middle tier sit down restaurant. So I gave the value an 8 out of 10. Destination. I put no. However, this is where I think nighttime comes in again, because looking at the patio, I think this place would be great on a summer night as a place to go grab a late dinner or have a couple cocktails or a couple of beers during a summer evening. And in that case, I think it probably would be a destination point. Would I meet a friend there? Yeah, I would. Would I take a date there? Hell yeah, I would.
Right?
So overall, I really loved it. My overall score was 8.6, and yeah, I think if you're in the area, definitely go check it out. It's definitely a worthy restaurant.
Yeah, I just realized I didn't give the pickles their due credit. They weren't what I expected, because I expected them to be like somewhat dried out. However, these pickles were so damn still crispy and fresh, yet fried with the batter that still stuck. They really were good. Like, they just weren't what I expected. Going forward, I would order them again, and they would probably get a higher score. So he didn't mislead us for sure. And again, I think the way you phrased it, from a server standpoint, he was great.
Smarter challenges.
All right, this week's Smarter Challenge. And I think when we, did the last episode, I was like, give a book report on War of Your Choice. And what did we learn, if anything? And when I say we, it's not just you and I, but reflect on what did we learn as individuals, but also what did our community learn? What did our country learn? What did the world learn, if anything? And so ultimately, it's just to give you phrased it very well at the beginning of the show, a synopsis of a war and what could be learned from it. And with that, would you care to go first, or you want me just to spit it out and go?
Why don't you lay down the railroad tracks so that way I know what to do, and then you can clean up after me.
All right. It's not about cleaning up. It's really about reviewing a war in a sense where I think you chose a war that was more recent than mine. My war, in my eyes, is still fairly recent. The problem is as the population continues to age, they have forgotten the impact of this war and what it really did in so many different forms. So my choice was the Vietnam War. So what happened was the French ultimately at one point owned Vietnam. They decided they were going to, I want to use the term free it, divide it into two different sections. So now you have North Vietnam and South Vietnam. And of course a feud starts because, God damn it, we're greedy and we want it all. So the Vietnam War started on November 1st, 1955. It's a long damn time ago. It ended officially April 30th, 1975. For anyone who's not, doing the math super quick, that's 19 years, 5 months, 4 weeks, which is hard to believe because some months are longer than 4 weeks, and 1 day. 19 years, 5 months, 4 weeks, 1 day. This war included and involved territories from South Vietnam, North Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, the South China Sea, the Gulf of Thailand, and there were also spillovers of this war that led into China and Thailand itself. The ultimate long-term result of this war was that North Vietnam and the North Vietnamese were victorious. They won, which caused a reunification of North Vietnam and South Vietnam into the Socialist Republic of Vietnam in 1976. Now, living-wise, I mean, we're way too young to have been alive during most of this war, so that's not a thing. But there are some interesting things to think about. So there was North, there was South. We're about to get into different sides and different fascisms. One important thing to think about also here and how this pertains is there's always something going on in the world. Well, at this point in time, it was the Cold War point of the world where there were superpowers trying to gain and have external influence on other powers throughout the world. Towards the end of the war, so 1960, or actually at the end of the war and then some, the Northern forces, when it was really calculated, the North, the victors, their stronghold was the fact that they had 860,000 roughly forces, soldiers, 860,000 soldiers. These are the winners. Who were the losers? Here's something very important to consider, and I know you've always considered this, especially when playing Risk, is that the South, the losers, at that same time period, within that same year, they had, and at the stronghold had over 3 million, but at that point they had 1,420,000 soldiers being involved in different ways. So not quite twice as many, but pretty damn close. Another piece, and we mentioned the Cold War, is that the North Vietnamese, the victors, were being supported by the Soviet Union. You know how many Soviet Union soldiers were there? Roughly 3,000. Okay, 3,000 Soviet Union soldiers out of the 860,000, negligible, not far less than 1%, less than 0.5%. Now, on the opposite side, us, the North America, the United States of America, we talked about that 1,420,000 soldiers. We had 543,000 soldiers over there. So we're going from the Soviet Union, ultimately backing the North, winning the war, less than 0.5% of the soldiers backed by the Soviet Union or supplied by the Soviet Union. And on the flip side, the United States, we lost this war, I want to emphasize. We were more than 1/3 of the force, the soldiers involved in that war. So our death toll far greater. The North is the Viet Minh, the South, the Viet Cong. The Viet Minh, they won ultimately because of their ground supremacy. So they held the ground. They knew the territory. It is absolutely a forest in its own sense. Where we thought we were going to dominate this war is that because we were there and the United States had an air superiority. What did this really mean? So we have air superiority. Well, we used all sorts of chemicals and contagions and biological or ecological elements to burn down forests to try to beat their soldiers or kill them. And what did we end up doing? If you haven't seen the videos, they're terrifying. We sprayed all these areas with things like Agent Orange and napalm, and there are videos out there. I think this would be considered a war crime committed by the United States, of villagers running around, taking their clothes off because this chemical was burning their skin, eating it right off as acid. one of the key learnings here, well, if you're going to learn, is really the damage the United States does in the world in order to make a few dollars. There's other sides to this war. There's the drug side and the CIA side and the money side and the gun side and everything else. But the United States Air Force destroyed more than 20% of the jungles in Vietnam, and in particular South Vietnam, and upwards of 50% of the mangrove forests, while they were spraying well over 20 million gallons of toxic herbicides to do this. So the war is one of the greatest examples of ecocide, so the destruction of an environment by humans. And I am super curious because we now realize this is what the United States does. What did we do in Saudi Arabia? What did we do in Afghanistan? What are we doing really in Ukraine? Whether or not we have soldiers over there, but we're throwing away money, losing a war. The ceasefire for the Vietnam War was ultimately called on January 28th, 1973. As we already mentioned, the timeline didn't quite stop because there was a continuation of both sides looking for a war of flags, trying to gain more territory. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, one person wins. At one point, Nixon threatened to re-intervene, but the political turmoil that was going on in the United States, we're all talking about free love and hippies right now, which I'm not saying they were wrong, so please don't take that derogatorily. But when the Senate saw how the American public reacted, they stepped in and were like, nope, you're not going back. Ultimately, what happens at the end of this war? There is absolute chaos. There's unrest and panic by civilians and politicians to get the hell out of Dodge, out of South Vietnam, where we were supporting. And then there's the United States impact. We treated our soldiers like crap when they came back. Hey, they were drafted, so we didn't even mention that. A lot goes on in this war, but we drafted them. And another aspect, man, there were such war crimes during this war committed by the United States, by the Vietnamese, by other countries that did get involved. These things included torture, bombing of civilian targets. Hey, who was the Air Force dominance there? Okay. Prisoners of war and terrorism. Long story short, the bigger impacts are movies most people can't even fathom anymore. Forrest Gump is a good example. Rambo is another great example. People look at these movies now and they're like, that's just Sylvester Stallone trying to kick some ass and take some names. No, these were political movies that were done because of the travesties that our country committed, and then also that we as Americans committed on soldiers returning, most of which did not have a choice. You got to understand they were drafted. They didn't choose to go over and do these things. And then we treated them poorly. Really, the long lessons learned here are maybe this wasn't the best way to go. We should probably do things differently. However, I don't know if the United States did learn. I don't know that, we as civilians who continue to support the involvement in other wars learned as well, because we ended up doing basically the same thing in Afghanistan. And granted, we don't have any soldiers over in Ukraine right now. Who knows where that one goes long term? I'm guessing based by the fact that Russia's involved, we're not going to go any deeper into that territory. But what happens with the billions and hundreds of billions at this point of dollars that we actually, I think we hit $1 trillion, didn't we, of dollars we've given to Ukraine and potentially not done the right thing with? FAFSA. And that's it. Ultimately, I don't know that Americans have learned from this war.
All right. So the one I did was the Grecco Persian War. This happened in the 5th century BC. It consisted of a series of conflicts between the Greek city-states, and which was primarily led by both Athens and Sparta, versus the Persian Empire, led by Darius I and Xerxes I. This particular war really consisted of 4 main battles, if you will. Those would be like the main highlights. You have the Battle of Marathon, which happened in 490 BC. The Battle of Thermopylae, which happened in 480 BC. Battle of Salamis, I don't know. Salamis. And then I'm going to butcher this last one too. Is the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC. Some of the big things to kind of take away, this particular war has really been dubbed mainly the East versus West, where the Persians, which I guess nowadays we'd probably say like the Arabs or the Middle East, were starting to encroach and come into Europe, if you will, going into Greece. And I'm assuming that they probably thought they would be easy pickings because they were city states. So they each, like Athens was its own like little city state or like state, like if you would say like Colorado, right? And then you got Sparta, which would be like Nebraska maybe or something like that. It'd actually probably be more like Texas, but
Rhode Island.
I mean, because you know Texas, like don't mess with them, right? Everything's bigger in Texas.
Yeah, don't mess with Sparta.
Yeah, don't mess with Sparta. So maybe Sparta is more like Texas, but in a smaller version. But in any case, what ends up happening here is that despite the Greeks being divided into like these various city states, they did come together, and they were led by both, like I said, Athens and Sparta, to lead all the city states together against the leaders of the Persian army. Some of the main takeaways of this particular war is that it was very much strategic battles. The Greeks displayed a lot of strategy here, which is still utilized today, still referenced in a lot of movies today. Probably one of the main, probably one of the more popular pop culture movies in the last probably 10, 15 years might have been is the 300, right? But here, like it's about using the Greeks utilize their terrain to overcome extreme odds. They were usually outnumbered at least minimum 2-1, if not more. This particular, at least even like the Battle of Thermopylae, that has more about that deals not only with using the terrain to battle high numbers, but it also like and a lesson learned here is about espionage and spies or traitors within your own ranks. Also, it also talks about knowing that the odds are against you and being able to fight for a common reason and sacrifice yourself, and how important that is. The Greeks in this war, like I said, they were totally outnumbered, but they used strategy to their advantage by attacking first in some cases, using the terrain in other cases, and they inflicted so much damage against the Persian Empire that they finally gave up and went away. And the Battle of the Salamis, I'm going to call it Battle of Salami, but Salamis. This was a naval battle, but their navy was they were much better tacticians, and they had a lot more maneuverability with their ships than the Persians did, and they were able to defeat that navy. So that also brought in like naval warfare as well into this. And one of the biggest payoffs of this is the cultural significance, because if the Persians would have won that war, there's a high probability Western civilization would not be what it is today, because we probably wouldn't have the Greek philosophers. We wouldn't have Plato. We wouldn't have Aristotle. We wouldn't have the math guy, Pythagoras. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Pythagorean.
Yeah. Pythagoras, right? Isn't that his name?
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have all those things, and probably maybe not into like Greek mythology, and like basically Western civilization as we know it today may not even have existed.
I love that. You just, because I don't think I am re-looking at this and I had never considered it that way.
So that was like a really super brief synopsis. I have like 4 or 5 pages here, but but I just wanted to give you guys like the main highlights. Those are the 4 main battles. Go do your research. Check out those 4 main battles. Look at the significance of each of those battles, because really you got the backgrounds, like Battle of Marathon. You want to look at the background, the Greek strategy that they use, the terrain advantage that they use, the phalanx formation. That became very powerful, the way they just came together and used their shields to protect one another. And that Greek victory they had, once again, overcoming huge odds, they inflicted so much damage that it screwed them over. So here they like that helped with the morale, determination, the psychological impact, and then there's the lasting legacy, which that led into the Battle of Thermopylae. There, yeah, the strategic positioning in that pass of was it Hell's Gates or something like that?
Hell's Gate.
Courage and sacrifice. Because of that courage and sacrifice that they did, they were able to slow down the Persian army just enough for the rest of the Greek armies to come together to be able to defeat them. Once again, you have information security from this and adaptability to the terrain and the situations that they were put into. The Battle of Salamis, or Salami as I'm calling it. Yeah, the strategic maneuverability, unity and coordination, adaptability, psychological warfare that they used. And then the last one, Plataea. They had a great defensive strategy going in there, unity and cooperation, leadership that was done, adaptability and legacy. But once again, like, just take a look at those. I think you would find anyone who, if you're listening to this part and you made it this far, definitely like take a little bit of time to reevaluate and look at the Grecco Persian War, especially if you value Western civilization whatsoever, because there's a lot of without the Greeks winning this war and standing up to the Persian army, things that we have or things that we've built our society upon may not have existed, because it would have been lost. So that's what I have right there.
That's a good point. Like I said, man, some great points with that. Being, averaging 470 years BC-ish, 500 years before Christ. So very interesting. A great war to assess and just consider, where are we today? Even for me, just something more recent. If we hadn't considered that, and to your point, and you bringing up your example, how much more profound is that? Do people... Are you considering the impacts this war had and how you can apply that to your own life, and or how you view different things, including the war in Ukraine? Because my consensus, my questioning, my asking so most recently is that most Americans are perfectly fine with America giving all these dollars to the Ukraine to support, not considering what our dollars have done in the past, including burning up upwards of 50% of forests in South Vietnam during the Vietnamese War. Like, literally the example of our damage to the world. But please go get an electric car so we can have children mining cobalt in countries where they don't have child labor laws, so you can drive that car.
So, it's great that you're bringing that up as far as, with Vietnam, what we learned in those lessons here. And I think, likewise, here, depending on how you view things, the battle that we're going through today, where we have to become adaptable, is an information war.
Yes.
And not only is it an information war, but there is the possibility, right now, we're coming under siege, and there's a possibility that we could lose the American culture. And there's a lot of positive things about the American culture, where, for the longest time, people looked up to America and they saw our flag as a sign of freedom and stuff like that. But yet, if we allow ourselves to be overtaken by the masses that are coming over, and the masses are, they're from Latin America. There's people coming over from China. There are people coming over here illegally as well from Arab nations. If we allow these people to take us over, it's almost the same thing as we're seeing. It's different, like the battleground is different, but the same impact could affect generations.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think you bring up a really great war. Mine was pretty simple, in your face. Like, hey, guess what? We're doing it again. Yours is much more, hey, what are we doing that is going to have a longer withstand? Like, we're not talking about Hell's Gate right now. We're not standing up against that. And it is interesting because I do not believe the average American has any appreciation for what it really takes, for what it's like to be a soldier and go to war, and using Vietnam as my example again, and then come back and be spin on after they were trying to do what was right for our country.
Well, to give some other movie examples for yours, Born on 4th of July with Tom Cruise.
Oh my God, what a phenomenal movie. And also,
Platoon.
I cried. Every one of these movies I cry.
There's Platoon.
Full Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket. Yeah, Hamburger Hill.
Tons of them. And that's not to take away from World War I or World War II or anything else. But yeah. Learn something, please.
So I think there's a lot of these battles and wars, I'm not sure what's being taught nowadays, or what people. I know these are things that we, it's history, and a lot of times people are like, who cares about history? That happened long ago. It doesn't impact me now, but it really does have an impact, because if we don't learn from history, as they say, we have the high probability of repeating history. So I would just, I talked to someone earlier today. They asked me if I could tutor them or whatever, and I said, no, I can't. I'm going to be recording our show. And they're like, oh, what's your topic going to be tonight? And I told them, and they're like, oh, that sounds interesting. I probably have to watch that. Like, what war did you choose? And I told them, and I know nothing about that. And
there's movies about it.
Yeah, and when I go, one of the famous, one of the more popular movies that you might know that has to do with the Battle of Thermopylae is 300. And she's like, oh, I love that movie. And that's part of the Grecco Persian War. And then I told her what the significance was of it, and she's like, oh wow, that's so amazing. I'm gonna have to look more into this. So it's just weird. And she's like, I don't know, she's probably, I think 29, 30 maybe. But I'm just like, did you not, I know she used to be a teacher. Did you guys not learn Western civilization when we went to college, or what?
I think, when Noah says that, it's not an attack. It's
not
really
a
question. Yeah,
it's a question. It's what is our educational system doing by not teaching Western civilization if it wasn't taught? Because that's, you can't understand America if you don't understand Western civilization.
My grasp is that our education system in general, and I actually think Cherry Creek Schools is one of the better ones that gives more freedom than most, by the way, which is interesting because they also pay better than any others in this area, at least. But I think they are very structured in a sense where they're just trying to meet a number as opposed to really develop kids. And when I say kids, I mean young adults into adults. That's where we step in.
I know when we went long, many moons ago when we were in high school, I know our high school was nationally recognized as a top tier high school.
Our teachers were phenomenal. Ginsburg, Kinsley. Sorry, I offended you, Kinsley. I know what I did was wrong.
Is he still alive?
I don't think so. I heard he got cancer, and so I really felt bad. So Ginsburg, Pinkerton, all these teachers who didn't just teach us something from a damn book, who went through and tried to educate. Ginsburg's the perfect example. Model United Nations. Nothing will ever impact my life from a setting like that, probably as much as that did, where he's just like, hey, I just understand. And these weren't his words at all. ripples that go in all these different directions, and do you swim with them, against them? It's like sailing a ship. Do you go against the tide? Do you go with the tide? Do you follow the tide? That's all real.
You know, I always thought like Model United Nations is like debate on steroids.
It's not just debate on steroids. It's a freedom it's a comfortable freedom to take a stance, understanding you're trying to learn a different culture. And man, how impactful has that been in our lives to understand there are different cultures? And I just appreciate it in the sense of when I have somebody else, like I actually feel like I understand, because of my own heritage, the American Indian culture very well. But what about India's Indian culture? I'm still learning. Like, I don't know jack is the bottom line. Still trying to appreciate that. But it gives me the chance to be like, okay, so where are we at fiscally? Where are we at politically? Where are we at religiously?
I have a blanket to trade you. Sorry, that was totally wrong.
Man, it's just the whole thing it was such a great class that Ginsburg was a critical part of, maybe still is if you're still doing it. Cheers. It was dynamite to get an opportunity to, if you've never heard of all United Nations, you actually have to step out of your comfort zone and represent another country and have a debate.
Yeah, and have a debate. Defending their side or presenting their views.
I just always appreciate that during my first big debate, I got the goddamn Soviet Union. And I'm like,
I got like some Arab country, I think.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I have got so many tanks, I will walk over you. I didn't really say that, but that's how I felt once I realized their number of military force in the current situation versus ours. I'm like, this is a damn joke. Psst.
All right. Guess on to next week's challenge. Unless there's anything else we got to say?
No, a good war choice. And I think in particular for the viewers, you guys that are watching, watch 300. Or if you love that movie and you already remember it very well, consider that movie and then really look into what was really going on, because that's just one glimpse. That's one battle of because that war went on how long? 2,500 years?
No, it was 480, no, 490 and ended in 479, roughly.
It's only a year.
That should be like 3 years.
480 to 479.
Oh, wait, no. 490, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, but look into that. It's not necessarily a ton of time, but a lot happened.
11 years.
Here's something else that's interesting is how much more was accomplished quickly when we didn't have things like modern warfare, airplanes, all these other things. Because we didn't win because of our airplanes in Vietnam. We spent a bunch of American tax dollars making Boeing and other people rich buying their planes. That helped us lose a war.
Right?
God damn.
Okay. I think you like some fantasy stuff, right?
Oh man, how fantasy are you going?
Like elves, dwarves, humans.
Holy shit. All right, where are we going?
All right. You can use whatever you want for reference. You can use maybe like the Aragon series, that book. Yeah, that's the
Dragons. I love dragons.
That would be kind of like it's called the Inheritance Cycle, those books. Or you could use Lord of the Rings if you want. But the thing is, the question here for this fantasy thing is, which race would you rather want to be? Would you want to be the elf race, dwarf race, or human? And then what kind of classification? Do you want to be like an archer, a magician, a warrior, that type of thing? Like what kind of class and why?
All right, so we got elf,
dwarf, and human.
Dwarf, human.
I think those are the main three, right?
Particularly, at least in the whole inner world. Elf, dwarf, human.
Right. And then classification. So you got archer, warrior, wizard, I guess, and healer maybe. I don't know. Kind of goes along with Dungeons and Dragons too, I guess. But I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, so I can't really comment on that. But
All right.
Like I played some video games, and there's sometimes in these video games you have to choose like what traits you want to be and what kind of classification you want to be, and then there's like novels and stuff like that where you read like Lord of the Rings and stuff, and or maybe it's not a race that you would want to be, or maybe like what race interests you the most.
I think it's actually a really interesting perspective to consider that, because the humans were always trying to, there's someone always trying to push us to incorporate everyone. Whereas when you read those same stories or you look at the movies and the books, the elves and the dwarfs want nothing of the outside world brought in. And the irony here to me is that the smaller countries around the world are the same way. No, we don't want your American BS culture. We want to stay true to us. And then we somehow, as the Americans, deem that as foolish. But maybe the elves and the dwarfs are winning.
Maybe. And and then here's the other thing. Like if you're like whatever you're gonna use as your reference, so like let's say you're gonna use Lord of the Rings as your reference, you can choose hobbits or whatever else that they have in there as well.
Definitely not choosing Hobbit. Don't want no Hobbit.
You don't want to be one of the river folk and be like Smeagol?
I don't want
My
to be
precious.
I don't want to be chasing a Hobbit woman.
So I thought that would be just kind of something simple and easy and fun to do for next week.
All right.
I guess at that point, if you guys made it this far, thank you very much for watching us. We greatly appreciate you. All the viewers there on YouTube and Rumble, thank you very much for watching us. All the listeners on the many different podcast platforms you can listen to us. We greatly appreciate all of you as well. Please like, share, and subscribe. Leave some comments down below. If you do like our show, please hit that like button. Please, leave some comments. That helps us out. Also, if you like us a little bit more than just that, you can also donate to us, and that way it can help us keep this show afloat. With that, I'll pass this over to Jesse to close us on out.
All right. Remember, life is great. That does not mean it's going to be easy. It probably shouldn't be, because if life is too easy, you start to not appreciate just how great it can be in your current situation. If you didn't buy a lotto ticket tonight or a Powerball ticket, you probably missed out on your chance to be a billionaire. But regardless of that, remember, life is great.
Hopefully there's no winners.
And remember, conflict can be productive. I don't know anyone, at least not in my circles, that actually wants to fight. But the strongest people are the ones that don't avoid conflict. And now, therein lies the other point of, well, the United States stepped into Vietnam. We didn't avoid conflict. It wasn't our conflict. We wanted to fight. That's an example of, not my circle, people wanting to fight to make money. So really consider the smarter challenge was about learning in order to not repeat history, because those who fail to learn from it will repeat it, or damned to repeat it. Do not drink and drive. And until next week, when we venture into the worlds of elves, dwarves, and humans, archers, warriors, wizards, and more. Scotchman!
Cheers.